makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
New Year's is an important day in Britain because it is when the Queen's honours are announced. The honours being the awarding of some order of chivalry to distinguished individuals and personalities in British society. Personally, I find this whole charade ridiculous. I don't think there should be any order of chivalry, any aristocratic titles, any other similar, knighthoods and damehoods and lordships and whatever. This is all just, cosplaying medieval times in a modern, supposedly democratic society in the 21st century. But nevertheless, this year the honors received some controversy because Tony Blair was among the people which was granted a knighthood by the Queen. And not just any knighthood, he was introduced into the Order of the Garter, which is the most prestigious rank uh, of all the knights in Britain. So prestigious that only 24 people can actively be in it at any given point. So let's look back at why this is problematic. And the obvious reason is Tony Blair is a war criminal. He was complicit along with George W. Bush. They were the two main proponents of the Iraq War that led to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Iraqis dead. I lost count how many were killed or displaced or maimed or whatever. Not only did it result in, opening some festering sectarian wounds that led to a years-long civil war, but then it completely destabilized the Middle East, contributed to the rise of ISIS, and well, yeah. For those reasons alone, Tony Blair does not deserve a knighthood. And I think a lot of people agree with me. In fact, this is how many people, in fact, 738,484 people at time of writing have signed a petition to prevent Tony Blair from getting a knighthood. And I really love the goblin face picture that they chose here. Um, yeah, I honestly there's so first I want to speak a bit about the legacy of whether the Iraq War tarnishes his legacy overall, and I definitely think to a large extent it does. Now, Tony Blair does not have many fans on the left for his economic track record. Even though Britain was booming during his, this was the period of cool Britannia, and from an economics and cultural perspective, Britain was on top of the world at the time. That it was part of the reason also why I decided to go do my postgrad in London, because it seemed like a more exciting place to be than anywhere else in the world at the time. And I arrived at the very tail end of New Labour. And let's be honest, the crisis exposed the reasons why that boom period was a bit of a mirage. It was finance-led development. Um, it was, built on very shaky premises. But there is one thing that I will give the period of New Labour some props, and that is for all its faults, and for the fact that I think the main issue that many leftists like myself have with Tony Blair is that he did not reverse the legacy of Margaret Thatcher. He, in fact, continued it, even if he didn't go, as far as Margaret Thatcher did. Uh, he the main problem with Tony Blair was that he was a center right leader of a party that is by nature a workers' party. It's the Labour's party, and they should have done much more to roll back the free market liberalizing impulses of the Thatcher administration, but which, according to the third way style politics that Tony Blair adhered to, that was all good, you know. But part of the flip side of the third way was that the third way policy was to promote business, have pro business, low taxes, free trade, etc. But there was never any discourse around austerity. truth be told, and again, this is one of the few things that I will give props to, is that public services were very well funded during the New Labour period. Uh, Certainly in comparison to the Tories that followed. There was no talk about fiscal austerity. The NHS was functioning very well. There were no staff, nurse shortages or whatever. Uh, Things worked. Public services worked. And that if I am to say one good thing about Labour during that period, uh, it is that they at least they kept the country running and didn't try to basically squeeze the state into nothingness the way that the Tories from David Cameron onward have been trying to do. But all of that, of course, pales to the Iraq War. And I want to start by reminding people there's a very common discourse among a lot of people in Britain, and especially among British leftists, that Britain was slightly different than the US, that the grand majority of the British population didn't want to go to war, that basically Tony Blair went against the wishes of the electorate. And that's kind of a very convenient case of national amnesia. In fact, as YouGov polls show, the grand majority of Brits at the time did support the war. Again, this has been very much forgotten by large segments of the population, but indeed, in 2003, 54% of Brits thought that going into the Iraq War was the right decision, and then obviously that flipped, and you can see support for the war was pretty high, and then it started to sour, and I would say that around sort of early mid 2004 is when you started to see the trend to definitely be more opposed to it than supportive of it. That compares somewhat favorably to the US, which was very, very much in support of the war when it started, and didn't really kind of even out until 2005, and then only clearly moved against the war from around 2006, 2007. So it took longer in the US for public opinion to go against the war. Now, Britain also did something that the US didn't do, which was actually do a thorough investigation on whether the government was, the process of deciding to go and participate in the war, and that was the Shilkot report. And to his credit, this was begun under Gordon Brown, who was Tony Blair's immediate successor, also part of the New Labour wave. And the Shilkot report, which was not published until 2016, which many people thought was an unacceptable delay. I'm just going to read the headlines, but it pretty much explains the issues of everything that went wrong in Britain's decision to join the war. The US chose to join the invasion before peaceful options had been exhausted. Blair deliberately exaggerated the threat posed by Saddam Hussein. Yep. Blair promised George Bush, "I will be with you, whatever." Now, this is the most damning one, in my opinion, because it shows that really the case for Britain to be involved in this war was based on nothing other than a person, not even a special relationship between the two countries, because as we will see later, the report also concluded that there really wouldn't have been much of an impact to the relationship if Britain had chosen to stay out of it. This seemed more like a personal one. This seemed more like Tony Blair as a person wanted to be seen as, following the US in its military adventures abroad. And yeah, for me, this is the one that just irritates me the most. The decision to invade was made in unsatisfactory circumstances. George Bush largely ignored UK advice on post-war planning, if they had a plan. But having said that, I think that even a bad British plan was probably better than a bad American plan, because Brits are at least a bit more self-conscious of the limits to their power, whereas Americans aren't. Americans will, blow the country back into the Stone Age and then think that overwhelming force, that shock and awe is enough to also give them the solutions to all the nation building and reconstruction and whatever that follows. So they probably should have listened to the Brits in this one. There was no imminent threat from Saddam. Britain's intelligence agencies produced flawed information, as did pretty much all of them. UK military were ill-equipped for the task. UK-US relations would not have been harmed if the UK stayed out of the war. This is, like I said, the major one. I don't think there would have been a huge hit to the special relationship. Blair ignored warnings on what would happen in Iraq after the invasion. The government had no post-invasion strategy. The UK had no influence on Iraq's post-war US-run administration. The UK did not achieve its objectives in Iraq, and the government did not try hard enough to keep a tally of Iraqi civilian casualties. Yep, so it was a complete disaster. Now, there's a second aspect of his appointment that kind of bothers me, and that's in the text of the actual announcement in the royal family's website. They do actually have a website, royal.uk. And here you have Anthony Charles Linton Blair, was Prime Minister from 1997 to 2007. He is now Executive Chairman of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, a not-for-profit organization that works around the world. Now, this makes it seem like the Tony Blair Institute is this, this global charity that does development work, and that's so far from the truth. I think that also the problematic aspect of Tony Blair is his post-premiership behavior and what the Tony Blair Institute actually does around the world. And the Tony Blair Institute is not a charity, it's not a development agency, it's basically a giant PR firm that goes around and basically finds ways to attract investment into some of the most despotic regimes around the world, while helping them whitewash that despotism, and basically make a lot of very unsavory regimes in the Middle East and elsewhere look attractive to foreign investors because Tony Blair is there. He puts his brand on these countries' bad reputations to make them slightly better and get money in. And he makes a bucket load of money. So on that basis, I don't think his work in the Tony Blair Institute warrants any inclusion for a knighthood, much less the Order of the Garter. And I say this because the easiest way, if you want to get a knighthood in Britain, it's real easy. All you have to do is be a CEO. Once you're a CEO, go get on the boards of numerous cultural institutions like museums, operas, etc., charities, companies that do corporate social responsibility, things like that. Start your own think tank / PR firm. Do exactly what Tony Blair does, and that'll guarantee you a knighthood. That'll absolutely guarantee you a knighthood. The knights of today's modern British society are the captains of industry that have glossed over their plutocracy by sitting on the board of the Royal Opera or something like that. Yeah. So, or the British Museum. That's how you get knighthoods, and you also get like a wing of the museum with your name on it. So yeah. Now it gets worse because Keir Starmer appeared to endorse this decision to give him a knighthood. Now, I think I look at this and I think, what if Jeremy Corbyn was still the leader of the opposition? What would he have said? Because on one hand, he is a part of the Labour Party, Tony Blair. He did manage to get the Labour elected 3 elections in a row, which I think Labour has never achieved in its history. So, if you want to at least not openly condemn the decision of your party's most successful politician, because that's a fact. Tony Blair has been the most successful Labour politician in the last 40 years. If you don't want to go so far as to endorse that knighthood, you can always just say, look, it's the Queen's decision. I have no say in this. But Keir Starmer didn't do that. Keir Starmer openly said that he deserved the honour.
And no, I'm sorry, I do not think that this Prime Minister has earned the right to have an honour. I do think Tony Blair has.
So he's sort of trying to gloss it over by saying that by criticizing the current one, which I don't think Boris Johnson will ever get a knighthood. I think that would ruin the monarchy permanently. Maybe it's a good thing, actually. But I just want to show you a blast from the past, because the Keir Starmer that is the current leader of the Labour Party is a shadow of the edgy, woke, progressive Keir Starmer that once was. And I'll give you an example of a 2003 article published in The Guardian, penned by Keir Starmer when he was a young and ambitious lawyer, and the title says it all. Sorry, Mr. Blair, but 1441 does not authorize force. So he makes the case, the legal case, of why there are no grounds to invade Iraq. Yeah. Against this background, it is no surprise that the government has been coy about its advice so far, but on the eve of war, that is not good enough. If the Attorney General's advice is that force can be used against Iraq without a further UN resolution, he must fully explain how the legal difficulties set out above are to be overcome. Simply to argue that the interpretation of Resolution 1441, accepted by all the other Security Council members except the US and the UK, should be abandoned in favor of military action won't convince anyone. Flawed advice does not make unlawful use of force lawful. Yeah. Keir Starmer, QC, is a barrister at Doty Street Chambers, specializing in international human rights law. He's a fellow of the Human Rights Center at Essex University. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Yeah. So, he's a war criminal. Period. There's no other way. And sadly, precisely because of this Iraq debacle, he is, quite simply put, like, I personally think Margaret Thatcher, and I think most leftists will agree with me, that Margaret Thatcher has been the worst prime minister for Britain in the last half century or more. But in terms of the actual, lives lost around the world, damage done to other countries, the most harmful, malignant prime minister in recent British history has been Tony Blair. That's a fact. In terms of lives lost because of the decisions that this man made, he is the worst. He is the most damaging, the most murderous prime minister in recent British history. So that should not be celebrated with a knighthood or any other honor, much less the highest order. Though there is perhaps one bright side to this. We will get to see Tony Blair wear this ridiculous outfit. That is the outfit of the Order of the Garter when they are out. And I think I would rather be found dead than be seen with a hat that looks like it has the hind leg of an Afghan hound or a dead goose stuck to it. Who the fuck thought that up? But yeah. On that note, if you like this video, please like, please share. Most importantly, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.